Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Seed Speaks. This is a video series brought to you by Seed World Group. My name is Rebecca Carmeli Peslak, and I am the digital media producer for Seed World Group. Today, we are talking about the politics of sustainability. Sustainability is a hot, trendy word that we are currently hearing everywhere. The word itself is not political, but is thrown around frequently in politics. What does the word even mean? Do you think that politics impact the way we view the word, not even the meaning? Today, I am joined by two experts to discuss the politics of sustainability, Brad Brinkworth and Greg Ruley. Brad and Greg, thank you so much for joining me today and bringing your expertise to Seed Speaks. Brad, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thanks, Becca. Very nice to be with you. Yes, I'm a founding partner and a managing director of Sermo Farm, which is a strategic communications firm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, working with select clients in areas including agriculture, innovation, sustainability, and more. A core focus of our company is helping organizations and companies tell their story more effectively to enhance relationships, strengthen brand, and meet business objectives, with an emphasis on building authenticity, trust, and social license. And of course, sustainability is a concept that has become an important part of that conversation and an important brand consideration. We've worked with numerous companies, organizations, and farmer producer groups across agriculture, and it's really been a privilege to be involved, including the opportunity to have this discussion today. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Brad. Greg, could you also introduce yourself to our audience today?
Becca, I'd be pleased to do so. And again, thank you as well for the invitation and the opportunity to join today. My name is Greg Ruley, serve currently as the Chief Operating Officer for Arva Intelligence. We are a platform that develops environmental asset portfolios for farmers and ranchers in the U.S. and eventually globally. In that space, we work closely with channel partners that help us make that connection with a farmer or a rancher, help them quantify their opportunity for creating an environmental asset. That may range from a carbon offset to scope 3 inset credit or sustainability claims. Prior to joining Arva, my career, I've been very fortunate. My career has been spent in service to agriculture, in the space around agronomy and laboratory services, in the livestock industry, and had a tremendous 10-year career working in the seed industry as well and working alongside your colleagues there at Seedworld.
Thank you so much, Greg. And let's start this with you. What does the word sustainability mean, specifically to the ag and seed sectors, but also overall?
Yeah, great. It's a great question, and it's a definition that I don't know if it's elusive or if it is manufactured to meet certain people's endpoints. And I really think that it's the latter that creates a struggle in agriculture and in other circles around a definition. For me, it's making decisions today that are going to have a positive impact on the future, and I think it's a good way to look at sustainability. It means that you're on a journey. It's not one point to an end point, but it's a journey along a path to reducing erosion. It's a journey along a path to improving productivity and profitability, and it's a journey along a path that fits so well with agricultural entities, with farms and ranches that are multi-generational. And one generation passes their knowledge and skills on to the next generation, who then picks up the reins and takes the lead.
Definitely. And Brad, do you want to add to what does sustainability mean?
Absolutely. Well, I think Greg's definition is very good. From my perspective, working in strategic communications with a number of companies, I think we've seen that this concept of sustainability is one that has evolved over time and can mean different things from different viewpoints. Traditionally, it's been about preserving or operating in a way where we are good stewards of resources and we want to keep things viable over the long term. For agriculture, this has been about operating and producing food in a manner that meets the needs of the farmer and society, not only for today, but for future generations, like Greg talked about. I think the specifics of that can be open to interpretation. I think we'll probably get into that a bit more in the conversation here, but I think traditionally the focus has been on three pillars, which would be social, environmental, and economic sustainability. And I think as opportunities and expectations change in each of those areas, so do the overall expectations of sustainability. I think for the ag sector and for the seed sector specifically, I think there's been growing recognition that the economic needs of the producer and the sector are paramount and need to be well integrated and aligned with any sustainability expectations. Whereas in the past, sustainability was maybe looked at more as an environmental or resource stewardship space, kind of fighting for prominence versus more economic or profitability concerns. I think there's a greater focus and recognition now about alignment of those needs and complementing one another, which I think is a positive for agriculture and seed sectors. I think we see new innovations becoming a bigger part of the conversation and new concepts becoming a bigger part of that conversation too. So sustainability might be that core term or language that everyone refers to, but we see things like regenerative agriculture or newer terms that are tied to that, that are kind of refreshing and adding some new life to the space. And I think, talking about seed, we see innovations such as advances in crop genetics or seed technology that help produce things more efficiently, which by the definition of the term would be more sustainable as far as less user resources to gain the product you're producing. So I think that's all very positive.
Definitely, I agree. Brad, I'll start this one with you. Do you think that the word sustainability has lost meaning because of how frequently it's being used?
Yeah, so I think that's true. That's the short answer. I think in a way the term is a double-edged sword. It's nice to have an overarching term that is widely recognized for just ease of communication, directional alignment, branding purposes, industry programs, those kind of things. But it's true that once the term is so widely applied, it becomes somewhat diluted like anything. And so I think from a practical perspective, sustainability is very functional because it becomes a box now that's very recognized that companies, brands, organizations can just check that box. Have we addressed sustainability, whether it's in communications language or specific programs, and that can signal their alignment with the overall values of sustainability. But I think nowadays, like you say, because it's so widely used, to have more meaning and power attached to this term, it's becoming more important to add a unique twist that will stand out better and be more specifically attached to particular initiatives for any sector or organization. So I think you see people preserving the sustainability term, but they're trying to add some of their own language around that that makes it more specific to them, because just sustainability on its own, like you say, has been diluted and has lost some meaning there.
Definitely. Greg, did you want to add to has the word lost meaning because of its frequent use?
Yeah, I think Brad's answer was great, and I would concur. I might add a little different element to it as well, and I think that is its meaning gets adjusted or maligned or rephrased to fit certain endpoints, and that is that's a dangerous slippery slope that we go down, and we're going to get into the politics of sustainability before we're all done in our conversation today, and I think that's the culprit that's causing that maligning to occur. But I think as folks who are intimately involved in agriculture, our responsibility needs to be staking a claim to what we define sustainability to be, and then living up to that and sharing that knowledge with our neighbors, whether they're rural neighbors or urban neighbors. We need to share with each of them what a proper and appropriate definition of sustainability means to production agriculture.
Definitely. So now into the politics. Do you think the word sustainability has been politicized? And if it has, is that a good or a bad thing? And I'll leave this open. Either one of you can feel
Okay.
free to start this one.
Well, let me kind of pick. I opened that can of worms, if you
Yeah.
will, in my last response. So let me just pick it up there. It certainly has, and sustainability is not the only word that's seen that transformation occur. I think back to my seed days and in meetings with members of the organic community, talking about how the seed industry should appropriately find a lane in those organic discussions. We've moved into sustainability, regenerative agriculture. Yeah, climate smart is a new terminology that we're hearing a lot of, certainly around grants that were pushed here in the U.S. But even the larger nomenclature there. So definitely politics has had a play in or a part in adjusting those definitions. Um, but I'll sound like a broken record. But the role for us in agriculture really truly is to define what that means for us, and to then get busy working with folks like Brad and our friends at Seed World and otherwise to get that message out to the public, because we have a tremendous story to tell. It's multi-generational, it's dynamic, it's progressive, it is technology based, and we've happened to work with a group of people who are pretty darn humble, and they're not great at patting themselves on the back and telling that story. So these are three folks who are in roles where we can help do that, and I know there are people that are watching the webinar today who are in a similar position and can help convey that same message.
I definitely agree. Brad, did you want to add? Do you think the word has been politicized? And if it has, is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, no, I think Greg, that was very well said. I would agree with that completely. And I guess just the direct answer to the question, I think yes, for sure it has been politicized to a certain extent. And I think that was probably inevitable given its core association with environment and ties to concepts such as climate change that have been politicized really for much longer. So whether that's good or bad, I think it will make things more difficult in terms of navigating how to use or associate with this term. So I think everyone, from some of the groups that Greg is involved with, everyone, it's a little bit of a hot potato. Like, how do we talk about sustainability? I think this will continue to push groups to not necessarily abandon sustainability as a term or part of their core language, but really to look for ways to have their own take on it. Like I mentioned before, it's really about taking that term. Like Greg said, it's much better for folks in the seed sector and agriculture. Don't wait for someone else to define your practices or your approaches and define what is sustainable. It's much better for you to be proactive and to get in front of this and to deal with that on your own. And then I think to me, if you're doing that, you're leading and you're taking ownership. I think there's a bit of danger of the use of the term following into the category of, I guess, another buzz term, virtue signaling, where people are just throwing that out there without a lot of meaning behind it because they feel that's just something, a box that needs to be checked. But I think, like we're seeing in the broader political environment, there's a lot of backlash against that kind of political correctness where there's not a lot of meat or rationale behind it. If it seems too driven by political considerations or politically correct considerations, I think it's going to be a negative for you as a farmer, as an organization, as a sector, as an industry. So, but I think the seed growers, producers, breeders, they've always been folks who have been science based, education focused. I think folks like that who come at it with a lot of credibility behind what they speak on can really do a lot of good by just like Greg said, taking more initiative to tell their story, to talk about what they're doing, and then they're really taking ownership of the issue and really making it something that can be more of a positive for them.
Do you think that politics cloud the sustainability goals that organizations and producers are trying to reach because the word has been politicized? Um, Either of you, again, feel free to take this.
Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, I mentioned a little bit in the last answer, but I think it can become a little bit more of a political hot potato where, sometimes a more cautious approach on anything that's more of a sensitive term or perhaps a polarizing term that has merit to it. But I think like Greg has alluded to, I think for any organization, speak on what you can speak on with authority and credibility. So I think organizations like many in the seed world who have done a lot of groundwork on this are well clear in their communication and their policies and approaches. It's very good for them to put that out there and to be strong in talking about that, because I think it's a space where there has been a little bit more fluff thrown around, where if you have strength and actually you've put a lot of thought and science into this and you know what you're doing and you can speak on it, that's going to really help steer the conversation in the right way. But for sure, I think anyone now talking about any organization and what's our sustainability policy, or we see now more organizations, companies doing a sustainability reporting, you want to be careful with that. Like I think that's a thing of just be confident in what you're about. You know what you do. You have the right values and approaches in place. So just be strong in communicating that.
Definitely. And Greg, anything to add there?
Yeah, I appreciate Brad's kind of description. I'm gonna take a little different peek at it, simply because the work that we do at Arva Intelligence puts us in a position where we're having conversations with large corporations. They could be consumer packaged goods companies, they could be large manufacturers and others. And the dialogue goes a little bit like this. Well, our board or our shareholders have dictated that we set ESG goals, environment, social, and governance goals for the company. And so we've established these goals, or they have established the goals. They've sent it down to the management level of the company and said, now go accomplish these. But without a lot of direction, without a lot of insight into what could be done or what's acceptable or realistic in terms of meeting those goals. And that's where we've had the ability to step in. I talked earlier about the work we do with farmers and ranchers, but at the end of the day, we're literally we have 2 feet, one planted firmly on each side of a fence, and we're on the side of the fence with those farmers and ranchers. But we're also helping these ESG or these CPG companies and others better understand the role that actively managed farm and ranch land can take in supporting their ESG and more specifically their environmental and sustainability goals. And so, it's almost like being an interpreter, helping them understand that this practice or series of practices has this benefit. We can quantify it, we can deliver it to them. They can kind of mark it against the target that they have in place, and that's a new role for those of us in kind of the support side of agriculture to play, to be that point of contact between farmers and ranchers and the consuming community in a way that we can help them decipher those environmental goals and deliver a product that meets their needs.
Definitely. So, Greg, you just touched on my next question. If you want to expand on it anymore, feel free to. Otherwise, Brad, you can feel free to take this one. Is there a way we can move forward towards meeting these sustainability goals as a unit without it being a political conversation?
Let me be brief, because I don't want to restate all the things I did, and Brad will have some great insights into this question. But the answer is absolutely. There are things that we can do. A lot of times when I'm sitting down with a group of farmers, I've got to get them past the stigma first of, hey, wait a minute, what are you in here trying to sell me on? And is this some crazy goal? And it's really not. It's helping them understand what it means to kind of capture those practices that they are employing every day and every year in a way that they get credit for the good things that they're doing. And so that's one. It's destigmatizing the process and educating farmers and ranchers. The other side of it, though, truly is what I just spoke to. There's a role for us to play in helping consumers and helping the folks who manufacture those consumer-oriented goods, to help them understand that these nature-based sustainability opportunities have a role to play. They make sense. They're definable and defendable. and should be an active part of each corporation's kind of goals towards being more oriented towards sustainability and reducing their carbon footprint.
Great. And Brad, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, that was very well said, Greg. And I guess just to step off from that point a little bit, like I think that term sustainability for sure has just become something that is becoming more ingrained now, something that even just among your general consumer, there's more awareness of it. And sometimes that can bring pressures and expectations that can be somewhat misaligned because the consumer is not an expert on farming practices or seed practices or things like that. So but I think like Greg has talked about, it's you have to look at it as an opportunity to have a conversation, an opportunity to help educate and bring awareness. But really, I think the way that sustainability as a term has grown in the lexicon on a number of levels, it's probably inevitable that it's become more associated with high profile issues, expectations, and I think from an agriculture perspective, the potential negative there is, and Greg will know this more than anybody, but you don't, I think farmers, people up the supply chain, they're tired of being told what to do from the outside. And there's a bit of a risk there in how you deal with that. You don't want to appear defensive, reactionary. But I think what we're looking at here is for folks in the seed sector, it's really an opportunity to take the lead. If you don't want to be dictated to, get ahead of the issue, deal with it, develop your own policies and approaches, speak with confidence on what you're doing well. And that's going to be a much better pathway than trying to hang on and not do too much. And really you're allowing others more time to dictate expectations and potentially even rules and regulations for you. But I think I've seen a lot of positives with the folks that we've worked with where, I think there's been a big push, certainly over the past decade, for those in agriculture to be more proactive in taking ownership of their identity and their story, getting ahead of issues, developing their own programs. So I think as far as the trend, it's certainly the preference of, I'm sure Greg would agree, most in agriculture to continue to support the path of more industry-driven, producer-driven initiatives. And if you make headway that way, you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble. But like you mentioned, others who may even have different interests who are a bit further ahead, you got to work with those people. Relationships are important at all levels, and the more that you can have a good conversation, have a good relationship, and help shape it, you're going to be much better off both in the short and the longer term.
Definitely. And then, Brad, sort of coming out of your answer, what types of sustainability type legislations are we seeing, and how is it affecting the seed and ag sectors in particular? And then, Greg, I'll let you take this one after.
Right. Yeah, I think in terms of legislation, Greg would probably be better able to speak on this from a seed sector perspective. But in general, I think we are seeing more sustainability type legislations, or I guess just more broadly, more generally, more sustainability language in various policies, recommendations, anything impacting industry. And I kind of feel like, I'm up here in Canada right now and I have dual citizenship. I have Canadian and American family on both sides and things. I think here in North America, we're very well positioned and we're maybe a little bit weary of what some of the things we're seeing over in Europe. I think in Europe, we've seen a bit of that green agenda, environmental agenda kind of taking over, where the way that conversation has gone over there has been a little bit of a diametric thing where it's kind of regulation versus the industry, and there's more of an oppositional approach taking shape there. Where I think on our continent here, it's a much better environment, and we want to be more working together. And really, I've seen a lot of groups, whether it's beef producers, pork producers, dairy, the crops guys, just getting ahead of things and doing things where industry itself has developed best practices, has developed its own standards that they know will work well for the practical aspects of farming and keeping farmers profitable and that kind of thing, and working with government to make sure it's more of a case of don't let any legislation get in the way. And if we can avoid legislation, if industry is seen as leading, that's probably a much better approach. The danger with legislation is you have bureaucrats, or you have the political winds are shifting one way or the other, and you end up with some kind of hard rules that could be really detrimental to producing safe and healthy food. So I think that's what we all want to avoid.
Definitely. And then Greg?
So Brad's view, North American view, is absolutely spot on. I'm glad that he called it out, and I was gonna do the same thing, because I do believe that that border blurs a little bit when it comes to agricultural production, when it comes to supplying manufacturers, food manufacturers, and others. Food, feed, fuel, and fiber. Right? It's the four big F's that we produce in agriculture, and a border has little to do with kind of dictating that. So that's a really good call out. I think the progression that we've seen here south of that border of late has been interesting. A lot of administrative type activities around these climate smart grants, some tax law changes that support sort of the ESG goals, if you will, and now we're setting ourselves up for a highly politicized and probably prolonged farm bill debate in the states as well. So we talk about a 2023 farm bill. I'll just say I'm not holding my breath at this point in time, but we will have the debate, and it will be spirited, to say the least. So we're going to see that the discussion occur. We're going to see people who will try and take a sustainability or an environmental type stand and use that to influence legislation. It's not I'm not terribly clairvoyant in seeing this. I think anybody who takes a few minutes can see that the opportunity will be there. How we position ourselves, I think, is the most important part, and not shirking away from that discussion, but actively participating, whether that's as a producer, when you've got a chance to have your elected officials back in their district or back in their state, host them at your farm, help them understand the work that you do to pass that resource on to the next generation, and what your parents might have done, or grandparents even before that. Tell that story. Nobody tells your story better than you do as a farmer or rancher, and elected officials are looking for those real examples. We're all fortunate to be part of just tremendous trade associations in the seed industry. Great friends at IPSA, great friends at ASTA. Great friends north of the border at CSTA and globally. So the trade associations will actively participate, but they need that direct farmer or seed industry support. And so my encouragement is, just having spent a long time in that part of agriculture, this is not a time to have laryngitis. This is a time to actively participate in those discussions, and because you've got a great story to tell.
Thank you. And thank you both, Brad and Greg, for your time today. We are just out of time, but I appreciate you both for joining me this week for the politics of sustainability. I enjoyed learning so much from both of you and being able to share this information and expertise with our audience. Next week, join us when we release our first Seed Speaks podcast episode. This will be a special episode addressing the topic of innovation in the seed sector, recorded live from St. John's, Newfoundland. Thank you again to everybody, and have a great week.